used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Boom.
Look at his traps.
This one, let's go ahead and add one more 2-pack to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at the highly anticipated Knightfall 2-pack with Batman and Bane. A lot of people were really looking forward to this one. I do know that the original release of Bane is really hard to come by. A lot of people weren't really too happy with some of the choices that McFarlane made on this second release, but I will dive in and take a look at it and give you my honest opinion. Now, as you all know, I'm not, I don't really do videos like for views, or I do them when I am inspired to make them, or I really want to get something out there. So I have had this 2-pack for almost 2 weeks, and I just haven't gotten around to taking a look at it. Now, one of the main reasons for that is I have started a new project for the city, and paperwork and getting all the plans ready has really taken up a lot of my time. And right off of the heels of barely finishing another project that took me more than a year, I just haven't really had a lot of free time. Plus, working out and personal life, it's just been a little bit hectic. But anyways, we are going to take a look at this. I do have some custom ideas that I'll talk about later on. Definitely very excited when I saw the first images released for this 2-pack. Now, they both look very ruthless in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at them. Now, each one does come with your standard whack DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. They also come with one data file card to represent both figures, an incredible, iconic image from Knightfall. Definitely a painful image of Bane breaking the bat. Now, looking at this artwork, it kind of makes me think about something, and that is the difference between the original Knightfall Bane that a lot of people know and the later, more modernized version of Bane. I would have to say a more almost rebirth, even though that came later. There is a huge difference between the two. When you look at the original artwork from the original Knightfall series, Bane isn't like a huge monster. He is large, but he does have a leaner, muscular physique. Even when he adds the venom to his bloodstream, he's still not, absurdly large. But later on in the comics, I even think this image is more of like just a cover, so it's not necessarily from the panels inside of the comic. And they tended to exaggerate Bane's size, which went on to influence the future images of Bane and how we come to know him. That is where you come into that big, monstrous Bane, where he wears a tank and has all kinds of tubes. And this is a more modern, accelerated take on what Bane looks like. Going back to the original Knightfall storyline, he was never a huge monster. Although he did have that big brawler physique, I do think in future iterations, they did really turn him into that monster Bane that a lot of people come to recognize when they think of Bane, but you do have the original comic version of Knightfall Bane. Now, on the back, you do have a little bit of information. We'll hold on to this. Now, each one does come with their own accessories. I'm mainly going to focus on Bane. So right away, let's go ahead and take a look at the Batman. This is a repaint of Knightfall Batman. There are slight differences. I do have a Knightfall Batman here. And when you look at them next to each other, there's a couple of main differences, and that is the color scheme, the paint details, The original version had a sculpted, molded on emblem, while this new version just has a painted on emblem. And of course, the cape. McFarlane really diving into these wired capes, which adds a lot of posability and value to these newer McFarlane figures. And although I still do like the plastic, standard capes, there is something to be said about the dexterity and all the different ways that you could pose these new wired capes. He does come with some accessories, which is a batarang. We've seen this before. Two open emoting hands, which are cool for figure photography, and two gripping hands as well. So you do get 3 sets of alternate hands. Another thing is the battle damage details, and the head sculpt is completely different from the original release. Cool figure, really nice to have that option to show a battle damaged Batman when he's going to war with Bane. Now, as far as the Bane goes, he only comes with these 2 alternate fists, and I sort of have an idea of why these were not originally released with the first Bane. And I think that comes down to when they added the harness that the original release had and the tank. All of that sort of elevated the figure to the limit of its budget. And maybe McFarlane didn't even have the mold, maybe he did, but it had to be definitely for budgetary reasons. But one thing you cannot deny is that it's great to get these 2 alternate fists. Now, I have 2 more of these on the way, so I will be customizing one, which means that these can be put onto the original release. Now, I have various versions of the original release. Here you have just your standard Bane, and I did go ahead and pop out the fist, and they do work with this Bane. You could change the flesh tone on the fist to match it a little bit better. And if anybody knows, I I have 4 Banes. I still have one in box, and I have my custom Bane that I just changed a little bit. I added a lot of white to the mask and some green on the veins. So as you can tell, I am a big Bane fan, and I'm really happy to get this alternate version of Bane, based a little bit more off of the original Knightfall design, but he's still really big and bulky. But they did add some subtle differences just to lean him more to the look he had in the original Knightfall series. Now, I have heard of the Mafex version of Bane that has been released. Not too sure I will look for that one. I mean, I can, it's not a big deal. But I just think that that one won't necessarily scale well with the 7-inch McFarlane standard figures. I'll have to look into a video and see if they compare that Mafex Bane next to a McFarlane Batman. And if I think it looks good, or that if it's something that I do want to add to my, Bane collection, which I have a lot of figures of Bane that are definitely from different companies, I will go ahead and pick up that Bane. Now, very interesting that they went with a, classic Bane design for the colors and the way his venom tubes are connected, but they kept the same mold of their original Rebirth Bane release. One thing I can see is this Bane definitely looks taller than the original Bane. I'm not sure why. Haven't really looked into it that much, but that was the first thing that caught my eye, was that he's definitely slightly taller than the original. He's now taking a closer look at this Bane. The more I hold him and the more I have him in hand, definitely a big fan of this Bane. And one thing I would say is a lot of people were knocking, this blue sort of cell shading or comic shading that they added. But I really think that it separates him so much from the original release. It gives him his own look and his own style. And the more I have him in hand, the more I'm really enjoying this Bane. There's just something about it. When you move him around and start posing him, he just has a certain, I don't know, charisma that vibes off of him, where when you pose him, he definitely gives off a imposing and intimidating feel, and you could just see him, ripping Batman apart. And there's just something extra about this Bane release that I'm really enjoying. So that is the first impression I get from him, is that although they didn't change the whole body shape, he does give off a little bit of a different feel, and he looks a little bit more akin to the original Bane from the comics. Now, there are slight differences that we'll take a look at. I do want to take a look at the head sculpt, really a different version of the Bane mask than the original release. This one does have a more modern, new generation style of Bane mask, while this one has a more retro, old school, original Bane feel. They are both styled after a luchador mask, of course, having all of the details, but this one just gives off that true Knightfall attitude that you come to feel from Bane. Another big difference is, of course, the Venom tube. You will not notice it right away, but even the armband, where here it is blue and on this one it is black, the little connector is different. This one goes with a more metallic sort of conduit tube, and then comes out the other side and goes directly into the back of Bane's mask. While this original release on the arm has a Venom tube, the more corrugated tube goes from the tank into his head, and then you have alternate Venom tubes on either side of the tank that also port directly into his mask. So these are slight little differences that you can't tell right away, but he does have. Another big difference is the belt. This one is traditional to the Knightfall version of Bane, while in the original release, that is more of an iconic version of the Bane belt that has that red dot in the front of it. That is something from more recent artwork from Bane, instead of this belt, which is a more throwback to the original Knightfall Bane. Slight differences, I do enjoy them because they do differentiate him from the original release, especially enough to stand alone as a Bane figure. I mean, you got nice, smooth arm articulation. You could get him in a T pose. You got a lot of range in the waist, although he is missing a forward crunch. He does lean forward slightly. You do get a lot of movement in the arms. Look at those traps. And of course, the traps go in to the head sculpt. Now, he does have good articulation for what it is, but I do think his head sits a little bit low. We will be looking at that later on in the video, but he does look down fairly well. He looks up, but it is restricted by where the tube hits on the back of his traps. You do have right to left, and of course you could tilt his head for some attitude. Going down to the hands, of course, you can swap out this hand very easily. Get the fist, and that also pops in easily as well, giving you a lot more options when you're doing figure photography with this Bane. So I know a lot of people are happy to get those alternate fists. He's just a beast. Really, really enjoying this Bane figure. Let's take a look at the thigh swivel. He does have a really nice thigh swivel, which means you can move his boot from side to side without having a thigh cut. Kicks up respectively, kicks back very far. Now that is why the trunks are made of rubber, so that you could get that range. And when you put them back, they go back to their original shape. Cock out the knee. He does have that McFarlane hip swivel. Double jointed knees, straighten them out, up and down at the ankle. You do not have right to left, but you can achieve that with the hip swivel, because when you turn it, right away you go into a rocker motion. And of course, he does have toe articulation. Pretty simple. They do have a lot of shading of that blue color throughout the figure. The mask has it down into the waist and even into the boots, which at first people think you will not like it, but trust me, it is something that grows on you as you pose this figure. Take a look at him from the bottom, no tread except for on the edges, but he does have some identifying marks. Moving up, same scope work from the original release. It is textured in a real sort of cargo texture with a little bit of grain in there into the back. Now, when they remove the tank from his back, now you can see that sculpted detail in his spine, which is something that McFarlane likes to do in a lot of his figures, is add a little detail in the spine, which is something that I do enjoy and I really appreciate. That little added detail that makes it a McFarlane Bane. Now, on the shoulders, you have a lot of hair, which is another more traditional detail from Bane from the Knightfall series. Is he was a real man's man and had that hairy detail to the character and to these figures. Great Bane figure. Really enjoying this. Now I have been going back and forth. I am going to paint all of the blue on this figure black. I will be making a video of it. And the reason I'm doing this is because I do have more of these ordered. So I am going to get an extra one. So I'll have one in his original release, form, but I do want to have one of each version. Now, for right now, what I did do is I did extend the neck peg. Now, on my custom Bane, I do have fists that were gifted to me by Professor Bex. You could find him on Instagram. He does a lot of accessories and alternate parts for McFarlane figures as well as other figures. So go ahead and look him up. So one thing, when he sent me these fists, he also sent me a couple of extended neck pegs. So I did have one left over and I went ahead and switched it onto this Bane. Now, raising up his head gives him a lot more articulation and it prevents the tube from actually pinching against the back of his neck, which allows you to get way more articulation looking down, easier articulation looking up, and even way more articulation and just a smoother range of movement from that Bane head. So this will be the one that I paint all black because the neck peg will not be the original neck peg. And when I open up the other one that I get, I will keep that one in its original form. And really, that's all that I have planned for customizing on this Bane. I did think a little bit about swapping the heads, but I did come to the conclusion that this classic Bane head doesn't fit well with this modern Bane, tank and tubes. And this modern Bane mask doesn't fit well with this classic design for Bane. So it wasn't really something I wanted to go into. So I finally decided that I will not be doing that head swap. Another thing that is very different is the back of the harness for the Venom. This one just has one porthole for a tube, while this one has three. So it's a very different design. So you'd have to, really go into changing everything. And since I already have a custom original release of Bane, I would just prefer to keep it a little bit simpler. Now, another thing I do have is I do have an extra Knightfall Batman head from a custom that I did. So I did repaint this and stick it on this Batman. And what I have planned for this is I'm going to use this head and then I'm going to paint over all of the battle damage because the battle damage is just painted on. It is not sculpted in any way. And this will give me a Batman with a different color scheme, with a cloth cape, and with a neutral head sculpt. So when I make the video of when I paint this Bane all black, I will also throw in this alternate Knightfall Batman that I'm going to customize. So that's something to look forward. In fact, I have a ton of projects that I just have not gotten into. Hopefully I get a little bit more free time and I start knocking those customs out and also making a lot more content for you guys. I do want to say that when I don't make content after a couple of days, I know you guys understand, that this is not my, my whole life. This is my hobby. And when I could get to do it, you guys really appreciate it, as well that I appreciate you guys that watch my channel. But I do like to have a consistent output of videos and content for you guys. So I do have also a McFarlane topic video that I may work on this evening. That way I might be able to get it out tonight or tomorrow. But once again, thanks for the support and watching the videos. But anyways, I hope you guys pick up this 2-pack. It is really awesome. Hope you were able to get your hands on it. But as I always say, keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.